Painful punishments in history. A detailed account of humanity's dark past. Throughout history, societies have devised gruesome punishments to deter crime, enforce authority, and maintain social order. These punishments often involved extreme physical pain and psychological torment, reflecting a time when human rights were secondary to the perceived need for justice or revenge. In this video, we'll delve deeply into some of the most horrifying and painful punishments that history has recorded. Crucifixion. Crucifixion stands out as one of the most infamous forms of execution, especially in ancient Rome. It involved nailing or tying the condemned person to a wooden cross or stake and leaving them to die slowly, often in excruciating agony. The victim would endure unbearable pain from the nails driven through their wrists and feet, which caused nerve damage. Additionally, the position on the cross made it difficult to breathe, leading to asphyxiation over the course of hours or even days. Crucifixion was not just a method of punishment, but also a tool of public humiliation and deterrence. Victims were typically crucified in prominent locations, such as city gates or busy roads, to maximize the spectacle. The punishment was reserved for slaves, rebels, and criminals, with one of the most famous examples being the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The brazen bull. Originating in ancient Greece, the brazen bull was a horrific invention of torture and execution. The device was a hollow bronze statue in the shape of a bull, designed by Perillus of Athens for Phalaris, a tyrant of Acragas. Victims were placed inside the bull, and a fire was lit underneath, heating the metal and slowly roasting the person alive. The brazen bull was designed to amplify the victim's suffering. Special tubes inside the bull would convert the victim's screams into sounds resembling the bellowing of a bull, adding an eerie theatrical element to the execution. This invention demonstrated how cruelty could be combined with creativity to produce a punishment that was as much about entertainment as it was about justice. Flaying. Flaying, or skinning a person alive, was one of the most agonizing punishments in ancient Assyria and other cultures. It involved carefully cutting the skin off the victim's body, starting with sensitive areas like the face. This form of execution was intended to prolong suffering, often leaving the victim alive for hours before succumbing to blood loss or infection. Flaying was frequently used to punish enemies or traitors, with the peeled skin sometimes displayed publicly as a warning to others. In ancient texts, Assyrian kings boasted of flaying their enemies and hanging their skins on city walls, or spreading them over piles of stones as a gruesome reminder of their dominance. Breaking on the wheel. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel, was a method of execution popular in medieval Europe. The condemned person was tied to a large wooden wheel, and their limbs were systematically broken with a heavy iron rod. The executioner would often aim for joints to maximize pain while ensuring the victim remained alive for as long as possible. Once the body was mangled, it was sometimes woven through the spokes of the wheel and displayed on a pole. Victims could suffer for days before dying from exposure or their injuries. The punishment was not only a means of execution, but also a spectacle of cruelty designed to instill fear among the populace. Impalement. Impalement was one of the most gruesome methods of execution, involving a long, sharpened stake being driven through the victim's body. The stake was inserted through the rectum, vagina, or mouth and pushed upward until it emerged through the shoulders or neck. The process was deliberately slow, with the stake often blunt to prolong suffering. Linki, death by 1,000 cuts. Linki, practiced in Imperial China, was a method of slow and excruciating execution reserved for heinous crimes such as treason or patricide. The process involved systematically slicing pieces of flesh from the victim's body, beginning with less vital areas such as the arms and legs before moving to critical areas. The punishment was designed not only to inflict pain, but also to humiliate the victim and destroy their body. In Confucian culture, preserving the body after death was considered essential for the afterlife, making this form of punishment doubly horrific. Linki was officially abolished in China in 1905, marking an end to one of history's most brutal practices. Scaphism. Scaphism, a Persian method of execution, was as horrifying as it was unique. The condemned was placed between two hollowed-out logs or boats, with only their head, hands, and feet exposed. They were force-fed milk and honey, which caused severe diarrhea. Honey was also smeared on their exposed parts to attract insects. Over time, insects would feast on the victim's flesh, burrow into wounds, and lay eggs. The person would die slowly over several days from a combination of dehydration, starvation, and infections caused by the insects. Scaphism was specifically designed to prolong suffering, making it a particularly cruel punishment. Drawing and quartering. This punishment, used in medieval England for treason, was one of the most brutal and multi-stage executions in history. The condemned was first hanged until near death, then disemboweled and castrated while still conscious. Their entrails were often burned before their eyes. Finally, the body was quartered, cut into 4 parts and displayed in different locations as a stark warning to others. Drawing and quartering was not only a method of execution, but also a tool for humiliating and desecrating the body of the traitor, ensuring their memory was associated with disgrace. Boiling alive. Boiling alive was a form of execution practiced in Europe and Asia, often reserved for murderers, poisoners, or counterfeiters. The condemned was either placed in a vat of boiling liquid or submerged slowly into it, prolonging their agony. Liquids used ranged from water to oil, tar, or molten metal. The punishment was meant to be both painful and public, serving as a deterrent to potential criminals. The sheer barbarity of this method highlights the extremes to which societies went to enforce their laws. Rat torture. Rat torture was a particularly gruesome punishment used during the European Renaissance. A cage containing live rats was strapped to the victim's chest or abdomen. The cage was heated, prompting the rats to burrow into the victim's flesh in a desperate attempt to escape the heat. This form of torture exploited the natural instincts of the rats, turning them into unwitting instruments of pain. The unpredictability and savagery of the method made it particularly terrifying for the condemned. Burning at the stake. Burning at the stake was a common punishment in medieval Europe, particularly for crimes such as heresy and witchcraft. The condemned was tied to a wooden stake, and bundles of sticks or logs were set alight beneath them. Death came slowly, either from burns or smoke inhalation. The punishment was often public, with large crowds gathering to witness the spectacle. It was considered a purified death, cleansing the soul of sin through fire. Amputation and branding. In many cultures, criminals faced amputation of limbs or branding as a punishment for their crimes. While not always fatal, these punishments were designed to permanently mark the individual, serving as a constant reminder of their transgression. Branding was often done with hot irons, leaving visible scars that identified the individual as a criminal. Amputations, on the other hand, were a practical form of punishment, as they incapacitated the offender while sparing their life. The Iron Maiden. Though its historical use is debated, the Iron Maiden remains a symbol of medieval cruelty. It was a coffin-like device lined with sharp spikes on the inside. When closed, the victim would be pierced in multiple places, causing slow and excruciating death. While some historians believe the Iron Maiden was more a myth than a reality, its image persists as an emblem of the era's fascination with grotesque methods of punishment. Conclusion of this history. The painful punishments of the past reveal humanity's darker instincts and the lengths to which societies went to enforce control. Reflecting on these methods highlights the importance of progress in justice and human rights. While these practices serve as grim reminders of our history, they also underscore the necessity of fairness, compassion, and ethical governance in modern times.